It is November 26th. It is the 51st day since the war between Israel and Hamas has broken out, and it is the third day of the temporary ceasefire. Here in All Israel News, we're giving you the living room experience in the many living rooms in Israel right now, in the evening newscast. Many moments of tension and gladness are funneled into these moments of and photographs of the hostages coming into Israel on Israeli land. They're already in Israel by now. They're coming back home after 51 days in the captivity of Hamas. There are 9 children, 4 women, 3 foreigners, and another man with a dual citizenship, Russian and Israeli. Here are their names and their photos. Abigail Idan, 4-year-old. Hagar Brodetz, 40 years old. Ofri Brodetz, 10-year-old. Yuval Brodetz, 8. Uriah Brodetz, 4 years old. Chen Almog, 49 years old. Agam Goldstein, 17. Gad Goldstein, 11 years old. Tal Goldstein, 8 years old. Elma Avraham, 84 years old. Aviva, 62 years old. Elal Yakim, 8.5. Dafnal Yakim, 15 years old. And Ron Krivoy, 25 years old. All of those are returning today to their homes. Abigail, one of the 4-year-old girls that was kidnapped, both of her parents were murdered in the massacre on October 7th. And here's what Biden says. He says, I cannot imagine the joy. If you can hear him, I wish I could just be there and hold her. That was President Joe Biden. Now with the reporter, with the evacuees from Kfar Aza, most of these hostages are from Kfar Aza. Now they're not hostages anymore. And these are the families and friends from the Kfar Aza. Kfar Aza is a village in Israeli land that's called Kfar Aza because it's so close to the Gaza Strip. And she says all the evacuees are extremely happy. Beyond words, the excitement is very, very high. There are lots of clapping of hands and joys and hugs. They're so happy that this moment has finally come. Their friends, their families, people they know, their neighbors are in Israeli territory and they're safe. These evacuees are also looking at the news. As we see the screen behind the reporter, they're also feeding off the news and looking for pictures and photos and news about their friends and neighbors from Kfar Aza that are released now. They're saying the tension is still very high because they're in Israel, okay, but they haven't seen them yet and they're waiting to see them. Here we can hear their clapping right now. Just full of excitement, and the feeling is very joyful in the evacuees from Kfar Aza. Now we're going to hear a little bit about the location where they were released, because it is learned, we learned that these hostages that were released today in the third batch, they were kept in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, while others, I guess, were not in the northern part. And the Egyptians wanted to bring them through Rafah crossing down through Egypt, but the Israelis insisted not to, but rather to release them from the northern part of the Strip because it's just much closer to Israel since they're already staying there. And one of the women is injured, the 84-year-old, and she needs the hospital care. So releasing them from the northern crossing is faster, and that's how they were actually released this evening. And he's mentioning that Israel is willing to continue this temporary ceasefire as long as Hamas continues to keep the conditions of releasing hostages. And the news right now is that the hostages are right now not only in Israeli land, but actually just a few, just behind the military Air Force base called Chatzerim. And they're in these vans, and they're having a very warm and exciting welcome with shouts of joy and the Israeli flags. These are very happy moments. And we see, and it's confirmed, that these hostages are released, are in fact released. The anchor is saying, we wish we could see into the cars and see the faces, the eyes of the children and the mothers, but of course the windows are dark and we cannot look into it. This is the aunt of Dafna Yakim, who's 15 years old, that was released today in this batch. Her name is Tagit. She's the aunt, and she's very happy that she's released. She sees she looks well. Here's Elal Yakim, another niece of hers. She says she's very happy or thrilled to know that everybody's in general good health except for one, Elma, who's the 84-year-old. And he's Carmel. He's the grandfather of Abigail, the 4-year-old, who two of her parents were murdered on October 7th. Here's her photo. So she's released too. And he says we were hoping she'd be released in the first stage, then in the second stage. And he says, I'm so happy that she's released, but I'm not only speaking about Abigail. I want everyone to come back. And the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, will finish what they're doing in Gaza in parallel to all of this. Abigail is, by the way, she's also an American citizen as well as an Israeli citizen. And he says, I have a chronic wound in my body that will never heal, that my daughter and my son-in-law, which are Abigail's parents, are no longer here. The reporter is asking, what will you tell Abigail when you see her? He says, I won't tell her. I'll kiss her and I'll hug her and I'll hold her. The reporter is asking, what do you think? That he was mentioning your granddaughter most of his speech. And he said, well, something happened. We tried to promote her, put her photos out there to tell her story that two of her parents were killed on October 7th. And he said, I guess it worked. The reporter is asking, do you know how to welcome Abigail and explain to her how both of her parents were killed? He says, I'm not going to talk to her. I'm getting professional help from a psychologist and how to communicate these things to her. He's not alone. And she's adding, the reporter is adding that Carmel, the grandfather, hasn't really slept since October 7th. And it was very much tumultuous during these weeks. So Abigail is back, and that's what's important. Yes, she's reminding us that Carmel, the grandfather, has mixed feelings in all the situation, having his children dead, but his granddaughter released. So tomorrow, it's the last stage of releasing the hostages. It's the last and fourth stage in this specific hostage deal. For more stories, go to allisraelnews.com and follow us on social media and YouTube. More news is going to come, and we pray for the release of all the hostages. Thank you. This is Rotem Magen for All Israel News.